Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to make a short video here on how to create a graph in Google Sheets. I'm just going to use a generic concept here that you have time and mass changing. So the first thing we need to do is type in our data. Now, in my pretend scenario here, we of course start at time 0 seconds. Notice in this cell I wrote time, seconds, and then in the second cell I wrote mass and grams. I want to be clear that I picked to put time in the first column because I want it to show up on my graph as the x-axis, the independent variable, and I want the second column to be my y-axis, the dependent variable. So let's say that I'm measuring the amount of time and how the mass changes. And every 2 seconds, I take a measurement. 2 seconds later, 2 seconds later. I, of course, could type each of these in. But if I know it's going to continuously be 2 seconds and 2 seconds more, but I did this lab for 2 minutes, that's a lot of 2 seconds, isn't it? So instead, I'm going to use an equation, and this is very easy to do. So in this cell, this square is called a cell. I'm going to hit set this cell equals the previous cell, and notice how it says A7 plus 2. So it's going to equal the previous cell plus 2. And right now, some of you are like, dear God, I can't believe he just typed in an equation into there. But here's where it gets fancy. Now I click on that cell, which is set up for a math problem. And if I go to the corner, watch how the cursor changes from a hand to like a plus sign. And I grab the corner and drag down, it keeps doing the plus 2 for me. And so I could go out 2 minutes would be 2 minutes would be 120 seconds. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Almost there. Getting closer. There we go. So now, from a perspective of I didn't have to type plus 2 in my head a dozen times, that made that a lot easier. And again, the key there, I'm going to zoom in quite a bit. The key there is this cell is actually an equation. It is the previous cell plus 2. And then when I got to that cell, I went to the corner and I dragged down, and it kind of repeated the math. I'm going to try that same thing over here. Let's say that we started off with 94 grams, okay? And we're losing a consistent amount. And I'm going to fake my data here, which is horrible practice, but I need data. So let's say that I lose a consistent amount. And so this cell equals the previous amount minus some quantity. And I'm going to make that quantity tiny. So I'm going to make that quantity, here we go. So I'm losing 15% of the previous amount. So it's the previous amount minus 15% of that. And as I drag down, if I drag down, it's going to keep doing that all 120 seconds worth, boom. And now I have this very fake data for 2 minutes worth of reaction. So now you all will be gathering data in a lab or something like that, so you'll just type the hard way in. But if there is a consistent pattern, you can type that in. All right, you can set it up like if it's every 2 seconds or something like that. So now I'm going to make my graph. The graphing part's pretty easy. I'm going to select all of the data, all of it. All right, so I've just highlighted all of that data. Cool, I'm awesome. And then I'm going to insert a chart. And now it's thinking. And man, look at that beautiful chart it made. I have some problems with this chart. First of all, I don't want a line chart. I want all of the dots. There we go. Look at all those dots. Beautiful. Because the dots represent each one of these little points along the way. Also, because I went ahead and typed time and mass and I took seconds and grams, look, my axes are already labeled. Look, this is the time in seconds, and this is the mass in grams. That's beautiful. A little bit of preparation makes your job easier. Okay, now I want to customize this just slightly. I'm already happy with the chart style, so I'm not going to change that. I'm already happy with my chart axes. I'm not going to change that. What could I do? Ooh, series, mass and grams. That's good. Oh, some data things. Adding a trend line. This is a good idea. When I add a trend line, this is going to actually represent the data. Now, that trend line does not appear to actually, let me change the color on it so it really pops. That trend line does not match the data. So it's not a linear relationship. But I can change it. I can try other things. I can try polynomial. No, that's still not a good fit. Logarithmic. Closer. Exponential. Wow, that's perfect. Look, the exponential perfectly matches up. Oops, what did I just do? I think I just, there we go, accidentally showed the data. I don't want the data labels on there. I keep clicking it, dang it. Okay, so now scroll down here, show the R squared value. If you don't know what R squared value is, it's a statistical thing that shows you how relevant the Y data is to the X data. And if the value is 1, then there's a direct correlation in terms of the values. And this is obviously going to be 1 because I faked the data. You don't usually get a 1. If the data is pretty good, you might get like a 0.99. But more on that in your statistics class future. Also, the last thing, label. If we can, we want to show the equation that is this line. And so this equation, 94e to the negative blah, 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 that's the equation that represents this line. And so we have a graph that represents the mass, whatever the substance is, versus the time. All of the axes are labeled. We can see all the points here. Man, that's a beautiful graph. And then I could right click and I could copy this sucker. Here we go. I could come up here and I could download it, or I could copy it. I could paste it somewhere else. There's a lot of things I could do from there. But that's essentially how you make a graph in Google Sheets. Oh, I didn't come up. You know what? Let's see. Murphy graph on mass versus time. Always come up with a title. And since you're having to submit the title to your teacher, it's a good idea to throw your name into the title. And that way your teacher knows exactly whose it is. Okay, that's the end of my video on making graphs using Google Sheets.